I'm Jennifer Kingson, the Senior Business Correspondent for Axios Media, where I write the weekly Axios Cities newsletter. I'm joined today by Ras Baraka, the Mayor of Newark, New Jersey. Mayor Baraka is a Newark native who took office in 2014 and has been working successfully to reduce crime, improve housing affordability, advance racial justice, and of course, fight COVID-19. Also joining us is Ommeed Sathe, Vice President and Head of the Impact and Responsible Investment Unit at Prudential Financial, where he oversees a $1 billion impact investing portfolio. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Today, we are about to see a new administration take charge in Washington, D.C. I wanted to ask you first off, what's your priority list for the Biden administration when it takes office on day one? What wish list would you like to present to them? Mr. Mayor?
Wow, that's a huge question. One, I mean, directly, COVID is I think should be a number one priority. What we were going to do to reduce the spread of this virus. How can we get this under control and begin to rebuild the economy? And while we're doing that, how do we rebuild the economy in an equitable way? How do we bring more people into the economy that have been left out traditionally in this country for centuries? How do we do that? How do we make sure that smaller, particularly Black and brown businesses are not crushed and are alive and well? And how do we funnel the kind of resources to these cities across America that would help us improve the quality of life for our residents around education, around housing, a deep affordable housing kind of program in these communities? And how do you shrink or reduce the wealth gap in these communities as compared to the rest of the nation at the same time? There's a slew of things I can go over, but those are some of the top things that I think should be tackled immediately.
Have you given any thought to how you tackle COVID and your other wish list of items simultaneously? Do they have to be done sequentially? Can they be done at once?
Well, I think we don't have any other choice but to do it at once at this point. And I think because it wasn't done in the past is why we have COVID affecting some parts of the community differently than it is affecting other parts because of the deep inequity that exists in these communities, access to healthcare, access to quality food, poor housing that makes people live on top of each other, that allows them to spread COVID-19 indiscriminately, nowhere to social distance or quarantine. All of those things add to that poverty that makes people have to take these essential jobs and become essential workers, and they're getting paid pay that is not equal enough for them to be able to deal with the issues that they have in their life. So I think you deal with it simultaneously. You have to, one, create a strategy and plan to begin to slow down things, to make sure a vaccine is available to all Americans in a cheap and very accessible way, to make sure there's education and information to go along with that, and begin to, at the same time, create an economic program that helps businesses recover, particularly small businesses and community businesses and Black and brown businesses in this community. I think we begin also entertaining the idea of how to turn the stimulus money into a universal basic income and begin giving it to people in perpetuity. Begin to start talking about raising the minimum wage. All these things have to happen at the same time. And then whoever's is in charge of housing, come up with a robust housing strategy that helps people to A, quarantine first, and two, begin to deal with transitional housing, homelessness at the same time, and making sure that there's enough quality, affordable housing in these cities.
Absolutely. I think we've seen so many of these important and sometimes painful dynamics that you're describing play out vividly this year. Ommeed, maybe you can pick up the ball from the mayor and talk about what your thoughts are on what your wish list would be for the Biden administration and how the dynamics in Newark play into that.
Absolutely. So obviously, as the mayor said, there's a broad list that all of us have, but I think to really focus on some of the things that he talked about, I think one of the biggest challenges we're going to face is that we're simultaneously going to be in the immediate throes of responding to a COVID epidemic, trying to preserve as many businesses as we can and preserve the economic strength we had. But also, quite frankly, there's been a lot of damage done to the economy. If you look at small businesses here in Newark, incredible carnage. And we need to start, I think, thinking really seriously about what reincarnation looks like. That it's not just about sort of preserving what was, but thinking about sort of what are the incentives for new business formation? What are the incentives to get capital into the hands of Black and brown entrepreneurs who we know struggle to access capital on equal terms? And one of the things that I saw personally firsthand when I was down in New Orleans is that if you don't coordinate recovery, if you don't actually do it in parallel and create those incentives, you make it incredibly difficult for any entrepreneur to go it alone. There's nothing worse than going to a retail district and having one store open. And those dynamics are going to be really hard, especially when we haven't been willing so far to create targeted assistance for state and local governments. The effects of COVID are not equally spread through the country. They're much more pernicious in traditionally commercial zones and in areas that have had to do more drastic shutdowns. And so I do think we need to really think about what a recovery paradigm looks like.
Sure. Ommeed, what does impact investing look like in Newark, where there are so many needs?
Yeah, so and what we've tried to sort of do is pick a few core issues where we thought that the investment tool itself was really well suited to the problem. So there's an incredible set of issues you could work on. Not all of them are ultimately the ones that investments make sense. The ones that it does, though, I think have been threefold. One, as the mayor said, we've made a huge series of investments to preserve and create new affordable housing. Newark has had a longstanding problem both with the lack of affordability and the poor quality of some of the affordable units that were built. So we've addressed both of those head on, as well as taken some steps to build new supply. And then in tandem with that, we've also made investments more broadly in economic development. We've helped anchor a series of large redevelopment projects in the downtown of Newark, as well as throughout the neighborhoods that have brought more than just housing. They've brought commercial space, arts and education space. We built a new arts campus for Rutgers University in the city of Newark. Added grocery and health facilities, and are working with our cultural institutions on some incredibly ambitious master plans. So it's been a comprehensive set of redevelopment initiatives, really grounded in the work of the strong place-based anchors that we have in the city, like Rutgers, like NJPAC, and done in tandem with the city around sort of development. And then the third area that we're investing in, and I think it's a little bit, it's going to be incredibly important for the future, is about sort of how do we reskill and retrain folks for better quality jobs. Even before COVID, there was still, even with very low unemployment, an incredible mismatching problem where people were undermatching for the jobs that were out there. And we think there's a series of very cost-effective credentialing and training mechanisms that can get people into better jobs. One of the things that's been so striking about Newark, and I think it's been a testament to the mayor and a lot of the leaders in this community, is that we've been able to build incredible trust. And it's striking, I think, against the backdrop of a social moment where trust has been shattered on so many levels. And that trust and deep collaboration and a willingness to really, I think, at both a personal level, a policy level, and a professional level, work together has been the underpinning for so much of the positive developments in the city. And whether you look at sort of the fact that the city was able to have incredibly peaceful but powerful protests, that we've been able to embrace an agenda of growth and equity, that there's a real commitment, I think, ultimately to sort of pragmatic problem solving, but rooted, I think, in a desire to really move equity to the center, make Newark a better place, but not lose sight of the fact that this is not just about sort of talking about problems, or talking about sort of the way things could be, but actually getting things done.
The quest for social justice is something we've felt nationally this year in a new and very powerful and visceral way. Mayor, maybe you could talk to me about how that has played out in Newark and what message you have for the nation about your experience there and what lessons we can learn from Newark's coming to terms with everything that's happened this year on that front.
Well, I was born and raised in this city. My family has been here almost 100 years. We have a deep history and commitment to this community. And we've been struggling, the issues that people have been struggling around the nation, we've been struggling with in Newark for some time now. We were under a consent decree. We've embraced this consent decree. Most of the things that people are trying to do, use of force policy, LGBTQ policies, de-escalation policies, these are things that we have had in Newark and trained officers on already. We have a deep commitment to community-based initiatives centered around violence reduction and crime. Our idea has been, if we could get the community involved in helping reduce violence and crime, then the need for over-policing in these communities becomes more and more obsolete, and we begin to automatically or naturally divert funding away from those areas and use it in more kind of socially oriented areas in the community, treating the city as trauma-informed kind of city, or violence as a public health issue that we've been talking about. And I think, the relationship between the police and the community has been a problem from the very beginning. And I think that's centered on, kind of white supremacy and inequity that has existed in this country for years. And now that it is boiled over for people to see it, as I said earlier, I think it's time and it's right for these things to be addressed.
I wanted to ask you about the perception reality gap in Newark. So many people will be interested to hear about the dynamic projects you've going on, about how the city is moving forward and advancing its agenda in so many different ways. Ommeed, as somebody who sees cities around the world, what would you like people to know about what's going on in Newark versus the way people out in the world may view it?
So one of the things that's incredibly frustrating about sort of Newark's position is that people use it as a data point in some preconceived argument, pro or con, rather than, I think, grappling directly with what the city really is. And I think what's special and unique about the city, I think, instead of sort of learning sort of why has that worked, what is working here, what's special, what's different, there's always this desire to put some pre-existing narrative on the city. So it's either the poster child for the underdog city coming back, or it's Newark is the next Brooklyn. And the mayor's probably heard that a dozen times. I have too. It's a bit of a ridiculous construct. And I think it sort of diminishes all the things that make a place interesting, whether it's sort of the racial makeup here, whether it's the post-riot history, whether it's sort of the interesting mix of anchor institutions. There's so many distinct things that are unique here. And the positives that are coming out of those things, it's really, I think, important for people to study those. And learn from those, rather than making Newark some kind of an archetype for some pre-cooked argument.
Thank you. I wanted to wrap us up by introducing the concept of healing, which is one that the new president-elect has touched on in his initial remarks. What role can city leaders and the private sector play in the healing process? How do we show genuine care in such deeply divided times? Do either of you have any thoughts on how we can move forward in that way?
One of the the lessons I've actually learned from the mayor is that one of the things we in the corporate sector can do a much better job of is just simply showing up. I've gone to a few sort of town forums with the mayor, and it's incredibly powerful to actually, go and hear and listen to people's real lived constraints, all the things that they're suffering with, the things that are problematic. Have them be able to ask questions about sort of, why can't I get a job at Prudential? What are the barriers, or what's stopping me? To actually show up in community, I think, is incredibly powerful in the healing process. And I think it's something that, it's not a lot of people's natural instinct is to do that. And I think it's been, we are becoming siloed as a country. We are becoming sort of cocoon, and it's even worse in COVID when we're in these digital bubbles. And I think it's a real shame that people aren't getting out enough and breaking bread in ways they wouldn't ordinarily, because I think that's where the trust and the genuine insight into problems comes from.
Thank you. Mayor Baraka, let me give you the last word on this one.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank you for having me. But, I would say what Ommeed said, more importantly, listen. Like, I think people should outright listen to what's happening and understand that inequity is real, that people's trials and tribulations, the things the obstacles that they experience are very real, right? And in some ways insurmountable in their eyes, and they need people to understand and see that, but also to help come up with real kind of pragmatic ways to dismantle kind of systems that have been put in place to prevent people from excelling. Once you buy into or understand the idea that inequity is real, figure out how to use your position to help dismantle that and give people a real and true opportunity to be a part of an economy that you think is so great, by the way. And understand that your corporation, your business has a role in either keeping these kind of barriers up or working to destroy them. And you have to decide which role you're going to play in history.
That's such a valuable message. I thank you very much, both of you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Jennifer.